Well, clearly that oral hygiene is very important and should be part and parcel of our daily activities as we run around being very busy. Well, you're just in time for our second segment here in the Twitter Jabs, and we're going to still be discussing freedom. I mean, we're going to be discussing expression of freedom of rights and speech. And actually, with technology and digital literacy, many Ugandans easily express themselves online without fear or favor. So that is why this morning we're going to be basically looking at internet rights and freedom. How are you supposed to use the internet? Well, it might be your right to freely express yourself or freely say whatever it is that you want, but the question is, when does it move from being a right and it gets into being an offense? And joining me at the center of this conversation is none other than Mr. Edwin Wanyama, who is a legal officer at Collaboration on International ICT Policy for East and Southern Africa, also known as CIPESA. I am also very aware that his passion for human rights, experience as a professional, and awareness raising advocacy and research in human rights, rule of law, and democracy. Now, he also holds a Master's of Law from the University of Dar es Salaam, Tanzania, a Bachelor of Laws degree from the Makerere University, and finally a diploma in legal practice from the Law Development Center, Uganda. Good morning, Edwin, and thank you for joining us this morning on Sunrise at Sea.
Good morning.
Yes.
Thank you very much.
Now, this morning we're discussing internet rights and freedoms, basically as teaching the ordinary Ugandan or teaching someone that is watching us this morning on how best they can actually use the internet so that it doesn't become an offense. But before we even dive into this conversation, we need to understand, for someone watching us this morning, what are some of even these rights?
Well, thank you very much. Once again, my name is Adrian. It would be unfair for me to go into that without. I'm a legal officer at CIPESA. CIPESA is a lead organization in a favorable policy environment for the exercise of digital rights in Uganda, Africa, and beyond. So our main core areas are research, policy analysis, also helping to input into favorable laws that governments are about to enact, or for change of retrogressive laws in Uganda, the whole of Africa, and beyond. So back to what she's asked me, let me briefly speak about what digital rights are. From the Twitter handles that have been in and that they've been trying to show and explain, digital rights or internet freedom simply means the right of every individual to exercise those rights that you'd ideally exercise offline without undue interferences, but to exercise them online. And some of these rights include, for example, as she stated much earlier, from Article 19 of the Universal Declaration of Human Rights, as well as the International Covenant on Civil and Political Rights. They include, for example, the right to information, that is your right to get information from all frontiers, the right to disseminate the same and to impart the same. Then, of course, you have what we call the right to privacy, that when you're online and exercising your rights, you should have that level of privacy where there are undue interferences, where, for example, your identity may not be easily jeopardized. Beyond the right to privacy is the right to be forgotten, so that once you use a certain link or website or online, some of you use these platforms, and always it appears when you go back to search internet using the same computer, Google is able to tell you that you were on this page earlier, you visited here, but ideally the moment you visit a page and you're out of that page, then you should be forgotten. So that's the right to be forgotten, which goes hand in hand also with the right to anonymity. Other rights, of course, do exist in light of that beyond privacy, the right to be forgotten, the right to anonymity. You have freedom of expression, which you should be able to exercise freely, the right to information, which also you should be able. So those are some of the rights that ideally as any individual you should be able to enjoy while online.
Now that you have expounded on some of these rights,
yes,
then I would ask, in Uganda, as a country at whole, would you say that we are exercising these rights of internet freedom?
just like the reports from the leading organizations, those that have done serious researches have drawn conclusions. In my own view, I would say it is, I can say we are partially free to exercise these rights, and also on the other side, we can actually not exercise those rights. But that again comes down to how we exercise our rights. For example, so if you go beyond the prescribed limits, then that's when limitations come in. However, we can speak of those limitations that come in even when people have not been able to exercise their rights, like they were stating of the internet shutdown, which was a total blackout during the elections. So that one, of course, even if the government recognizes that you have a right to freedom of expression, speech, dissemination of information, the right to privacy, and so on and so forth, they said, no, even if you may have your money to buy data, so we are completely blocking the channel within which you're supposed to enjoy this right. So it becomes quite controversial there because you've not exercised anything, you've not gone beyond the limits, you've not become abusive, you've not come overly, I don't know, attackive of the other people. So, but then you have no way of pushing your right through or for others to get to know what you're doing.
You highlighted freedom of expression and speech. Now, in your expertise as a legal officer, when does it become an offense?
Yeah, so based on the national and international laws, for example, the Constitution of the Republic of Uganda of 1995 as amended provides for limitations, general limitations to human rights and freedoms in Article 44. So under those, they will tell you that some rights which they consider to be non-derogable can be limited because if, for example, they violate the privacy of others or they infringe on the rights of others and so on. But also the international laws that we have spoken about also specify limitations. And to that extent, the limitations should be those that actually, I could say they should be lawful, because the law speaks of, for a limitation to be acceptable, one, it should be provided for by the law. So if there's no law saying you can shut down the internet, then you shut it down, it means you've gone beyond. So they should be provided for by the law, and then they should aim to meet, let me say, a legal obligation, something which is also specified within the law that satisfies also what the law requires. And then there should be an aspect of proportionality. So proportionality in such a way that you want to impose a limitation, but how far is that limit? Is it beyond, for example, the prescribed limit that you should actually take? So if it is too much for the people to bear, then ideally that's not acceptable in terms of limitation. So as you exercise your freedom of expression, just know that there are certain points beyond which if you go, then you'll invite the controllers, the regulators to limit. That's why you'll see that there are some arrests, there are some detentions, there are some threats towards those who want to express themselves online.
Now, that is to the side of us who are using the internet, the internet users, that you will probably face the consequences of the law. However, when we turn the flip side of the coin and we are looking at the regulators, to what extent are they actually supposed to regulate? So
the regulators also are supposed to operate within the law. That's the first thing. So one of the main things that the regulators use, for example, is national security. That if what is happening is bound to affect or to jeopardize national security, then they can come in and regulate. However, I must note that governments across the continent and even beyond have used that requirement to unnecessarily limit the access to the internet as well as freedom of expression, because every time they want to do it, they say we are doing this because of national security. And we'll of course know that if you're nobody in society, no one will come to limit you. But if, for example, you're a political dissident, a political critic, a serious journalist who has a huge following, or you are a socialist who has a lot of following, you are a very advanced academia who is very critical and has a huge mass of following and command, of course, or if you're within government and you know that you're very influential and you make some of the statements or you do what they think will influence a very large broad section of the public, then they would consider that to be a limit. So, but ideally, regulators are supposed to operate within the ambits of the law, because the laws specify how far they can go.
Yes.
But sometimes control of the regulators by the government itself, because they belong to government, sometimes poses quite a number of questions, and this has been witnessed across the entire continent.
Now, after looking at the internet users and we have looked at the regulators, how about the creators? I mean, we have some creators of different apps. So what are some of the things that they actually need to be put into consideration so that they are not even clashing with the regulators? Yeah,
so one of the things that, what I know is that some of these content creators have what they call the different codes of professionalism that guide them. For example, the journalists have a professional code of ethics. And then, of course, again, when let me talk briefly about, for example, in Tanzania, there are some applications which we can develop, and no one will limit you from developing an application. But it becomes problematic when what is done on that application or the content probably touches the toes of government or of people who are concerned or people who are influential in society.
Yes.
In Tanzania, there's what you call the Electronic and Post Communications Online Content Regulations. And in those regulations, one of the organizations in Tanzania it's called Jamii Forums. They had a platform where they would allow people to come in and express their views, discontentedness, or what they likes about government and so on. So government felt it was overly broad, and they tried to impose certain obligations on the creators, the content creators, and those who regulate actually public opinion, and say, we want you to tell us who these individuals who post this information are, and the organization refused. So Tanzania later, of course, came up with the Electronic and Postal Communication Online Content Regulations to require all people who do online services, television, social media engagements, and so on, to register with the regulator. Yeah. So, and it was quite controversial, and of course other countries tried to replicate, including Uganda, and say, all of you online content creators, you must register. So designing content, one, you must abide by the professional code of ethics that is governing your area of expertise, that's one. But people who design these applications sometimes have no control, and sometimes when someone has brought information, ideally if you're a content controller or an app controller, it would mean that you're actually first of all, at that time, you're disenfranchising that person and limiting their content from going through. So your job you're just doing is to put the content up there and people see. But then the regulator comes in and says, no. So the question again, I cannot comprehensively address, but the question is now to the regulator or the person using the content or the creator, are you going to block info coming through? So that you also become part of those who are curtailing and disenfranchising people, or not. But ideally, the regulator comes in to do all that. So there is an intersection that is quite controversial, and the debate continues, and you cannot fully address it.
Yes.
Yeah, so.
Now, earlier on, before preparing for this interview, Adrian, I did Google a bit about your organization, and I even saw some articles that you wrote and even findings that you wrote in regard to internet censorship. So in your expertise, or in your opinion, do you think that internet censorship is something that is necessary in a country?
Censorship is a big word. So I think censorship is a very big word that needs not to be actually used, because if you're talking about internet, we are talking about a digitized world, indeed a global village. So everybody is doing business online, everybody is working online, everybody is communicating online. I do not need to send a letter to take weeks to reach Germany. I just need to use my mail, and that is it. So censorship is a very big word. I think what I would take is maybe responsible use of the internet, and that is actually appropriate or clear regulation of the internet, but not censorship, because censorship means putting it off completely. But censorship is with us. So, but the word is very big, and it extends to terminating the usage of the entire internet. So, regulators, together with the private sector, there needs to be a middle position where you'll say that, okay, now we are not doing censorship, but we're trying to see how we can all responsibly use the internet without unnecessarily infringing on the rights of
other
others.
people's rights.
Yes.
So finally, as we wrap up the conversation, how best do you think citizens can actually express their internet freedom in Uganda?
Yeah, I'm also a citizen. I think the best way is, one, the first thing, like my other colleagues are doing, is to ensure that you exercise your rights. That's number one,
yes,
as provided for in the laws and international laws and national laws. The second thing is that in the exercise, we need to be aware of the rights of others, or rights of others that would put us at loggerheads with the authorities, with the regulators, and so on. Because if you infringe on another's privacy, if you abuse another person, if you choose, I do not know, maybe to do what we call the attacks, hate speech, and so on, then it can become problematic. So we need to exercise those rights responsibly. And also as citizens, because you know that the rights we enjoy spring from some people who are enabling us, for example, the internet service providers and telecommunication companies. And sometimes these that I've spoken about get directives from government, and they're usually stuck in between business and obeying what government is doing. So as individuals, we can also try to hold those companies accountable for the decisions that they make, to ensure that they do not unnecessarily infringe on our rights. So those are some of the things that people can do.
Well, there's something I feel like we need to highlight on even before we close this interview, and that is categories of people online that should be protected. Who are some of these categories?
Everybody should be protected. That's why I spoke about the right to privacy and the right to be forgotten. Every person has a right to privacy. So if you're online, for as long as you're online, you need to be protected.
How about children that are underage?
Wait, I am still coming. So
okay,
when we talk about encryption, encryption is the right of every, for example, for information to be encrypted, so that it cannot be easily accessed by anyone at any one time, because that is an enhanced part of privacy. But now when you talk about children, again, so children need to be protected. One, in such a way that, for example, Google developed a friendly way children can search online, for example, to get only children-related content, yeah? But also children need to be protected, and the first people here are we, the parents, and of course also the web pages, I think, are meant to understand they have designed in such a way that before you get certain content, you must be of particular age. But always there's a way these people find a way behind it, even the children. For example, in the past, you could not open an email unless you're 18 years, or even Facebook. But children have become so sharp that they do that. So children need to be protected, one, from sexual exploitation, pornography, and this, of course, has come out clearly, even in our laws. I had to talk about the Computer Misuse Act, the Anti-Pornography Act. All these try to protect children, even the Children Act, and so on. So they need to be protected. Now, of recent, that are called sex predation, it is happening so much in Europe, America, and everywhere, and it is even here also in Uganda, where children are convinced online, and then they choose to meet people they do not even know. But also beyond that is our children who are being trafficked in the name of giving them employment. Children who are below age, they use online platforms to solicit them and bring them together, and then afterwards they solicit. So those children are a special category. You're one of them as well, the women. you are the biggest victim, so you need to be protected. You have aspects of revenge, pornography, attacks from your fellow men. I don't know whether those of here also do the same, but sometimes you're underlooked. Even when you try to front an opinion which is very serious online, they consider it to be, this one should do what, should keep quiet. So they have that parochialism has extended to even the online space. So the women need to be protected so they can voice out their ideas. If you follow the different talk shows, even on television, you discover that sometimes the women are given probably a lot on, or almost shut down, you know. Hold on, let the man speak first. So you also need to be protected online from those sharing of non-consensual images, videos, the body parts, and so on and so forth. But also, for me, I want to say that even in the protection of women, also, we need to be aware that men also need to be protected, because sometimes there's usually need to emphasize when there's an attack on a woman, it will be voiced out, oh, they have attacked a woman. But when it is a man, as if it is overshadowed and nothing really happens. So the men have also become victims online who need to be protected, but more especially the children and the women and everybody else. Your right to privacy needs to be protected.
Well, thank you so much, Edwin, for allowing to be part of this conversation.
You're
and
welcome.
Bringing insight. Well, that was none other than Mr. Edwin Wanyama, a legal officer at Collaboration on International ICT Policy for East and Southern Africa, also known as CIPESA. I do hope that you are able to pick a thing or two in regard to internet rights and freedom. Right after this, we are going into the kitchen, and Sarah Apollo is making us a chicken sandwich. So stay tuned and don't blink.